Thank you for joining us. My name is Sonia, and I'm a proud Boricua. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm calling from Karankawa land in Houston, Texas. I am so excited to welcome today Naomi Klein to our live stream. Naomi is an award-winning journalist, New York Times bestselling author, and senior correspondent for The Intercept. Thank you for joining us, Naomi.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm so glad to be with you. And everybody at Move On, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. A lot of things are at stake at this election, among them the climate crisis. And your work has largely focused on climate change and how inaction has aggravated this crisis. Now, the climate crisis has kind of been braided with other crises, right? COVID-19, the largest unemployment crisis since the Depression era, and racial capitalism. I'm watching as my family and friends face another hurricane in Louisiana, another fire in California, loss of job, evictions, all in the midst of corporations gaining millions of dollars in profit from the COVID-19 pandemic. So what do you think people need to understand about the importance of addressing climate change with robust progressive policy and also, importantly, in an intersectional way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you just described why we need the robust part, because we are in the crisis, right? For a long time, climate change was seen as like something to care about, like for your grandkids, or like some off in the distant future, and it was very much sort of pitted against the kind of here and now banging down the door issues. But as you say, if you've lost your home to a storm, if you are dealing with absolutely toxic air quality because of these huge wildfires. My sister in Oklahoma hasn't had power in 6 days. She's being told she's not going to get her lights on until November 6th. That's pretty urgent, right? But we do live, as you say, in a time of overlapping and intersecting crises. And the way I sometimes think about it is that we are in this age of consequences, where all of these attempts to kind of kick the can down the road, it's up. Like all the consequences are coming at once. And every crisis has every other crisis within it. So with COVID, we saw that you couldn't separate it from racial injustice, gender injustice, the fact that workers in this country are treated terribly, the fact that people don't have health insurance. And the same is true of climate breakdown, right? We often hear this, disasters don't discriminate. They do discriminate. Whatever was bad before gets unbearable during the disaster. I came to writing about climate change by writing about what I call disaster capitalism or the shock doctrine. I was in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and saw this so clearly, right? That of course it discriminated. If you had money and means, you got in your car, you drove out of the city, you checked into a hotel, you called your insurance agent. If you needed there to be a functioning state, you were abandoned on rooftops and in the Superdome. And then white vigilantes came in and started shooting Black people. And it was in very many ways a kind of a preview of what we're seeing on a national scale right now. So we don't win climate action that is guided by science and that is as robust as we need it to be by playing my crisis is bigger than your crisis, right? Like you would hear a few years ago with the straight face from people in the climate movement, well, look, we're not going to be able to do anything about poverty if we lose the planet. So let's just fix climate change and then we'll worry about racism, or then we'll worry about poverty. And in a moment like the one we are living in, that was never true. But in a moment like the one we are living in, where we have mass hunger and unemployment ravaging the country, we need to multitask, right? So we have to build the next economy in the rubble of the old because everything is failing. And that's what we have the opportunity to do with a robust, justice-guided, science-based climate plan. And frankly, don't tell anyone I said this, I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you call it a Green New Deal. What I care is that the core principles of a Green New Deal, which is that it's guided by science and justice, guides whatever the plan is. And so, we don't have a choice. I mean, the idea that it's somehow more strategic to just carve climate out is, I think, the opposite of strategic, because what you see is that if people believe that climate action is going to cost them jobs, is going to make their life more expensive, they will reject it, and they have rejected it in those iterations. And so I think it's really a very good development that Joe Biden always talks about jobs, as soon as the issue of climate change comes up. We do need to understand that this is a make or break decade for climate, that we need to change everything in the next 10 years. The good news is that people understand that the status quo isn't working for them anyway. So that there is, I think, more of an appetite for that scale of change in a moment of crisis. And
exactly,
the Green New Deal, it's the name takes its inspiration from the original New Deal. And it's a reminder that moments of crisis in American history have provided the catalyst for the scale of change that we need.
Exactly. What you mentioned about disaster capitalism is so relatable to me, because as a person who has most of my family either in Puerto Rico or Houston, in 2017, I saw these massive storms, Harvey and Maria, ravage where we were from. And I saw, yes, the horrifying impacts in Houston, but I saw the disproportionate response that both places received. And I think you're exactly right. There's not a lot of silver linings when you look at the moment after a disaster, but what has been really enlightening has been seeing the vigor that young people, low-income people, people of color have adopted in the face of these moments, and the creativity and innovation that is possible if they are supported through broad strokes policy. At least in Puerto Rico, what we've seen is the huge rise of innovative agriculture that tries to take into account the way that we're going to expect a lot more hurricanes to be passing through a Caribbean sea. So anyway, that's just an example of how industry, I think especially people who work in industry, even in a place like Baytown, Texas, where I'm from, people are starting to understand that it is even make or break for their jobs. And that requires a mindset change. So you've also said that along these lines, there's bold transformative action, or there's sinking ground, burning ground, and churning ground. No middle ground on climate policy. You've also coined the term shock doctrine, which you just mentioned, or the way in which dangerous and predatory ideas get implemented during extremely difficult economic and social moments, say like right now. So what do you want our audiences to understand about their role in advocating for more impactful climate policy and the importance of a Biden-Harris administration in that advocacy?
All right, so there's a lot there, but it's interesting that you're talking about Houston and Puerto Rico and that kind of lived experience. I think there are more and more voters who have that kind of lived experience. This is not an abstract issue for them. So we are here 2 days before the election. So that means that the first thing that we need to do is vote. We need to get rid of Trump, and not just vote yourself, but as you heard, get 3 friends to vote too, and remind them, and really just do everything you possibly can in the next few days. And that matters because, as we were just talking about, we cannot lose this next decade. Trump is worse than inaction. It's active planetary arson that he is engaged in, desecrating some of the last pieces of pristine wilderness, opening them up to oil and gas leasing, attacking every environmental protection on the books. And he has also implemented a kind of shock doctrine where the cover of his nonstop shocks and the pandemic is being used to accelerate all of this while handing out massive no strings attached bailouts to fossil fuel companies. So we are seeing an example of what I've called the shock doctrine right now. A second term would be a shock and awe approach, I'm absolutely convinced, because it would just be Trump unleashed with absolutely nothing to lose. No re-election to worry about. And in that context, even if we were to win every battle against his latest terrible, terrible plan, and we won't win every battle, we would still be on burning ground. So Biden-Harris winning does not fix everything by any means, and I think we all know that. It just gets us to the ground where we're able to start. The real work starts at the beginning of that administration. And that's why these next days matter so much, why we have to make sure that Trump is absolutely and irrefutably trounced. But in terms of our role and my role, your role, if we end up with a Biden administration, and we must, it's, I think, very much to keep up the sense of urgency. Don't believe anyone who tells you that you can't have influence. Or who tells you, give them a chance, they're under so much pressure, precisely because the oil and gas company will be pressuring them to roll back their most ambitious promises. Grassroots movements, social movements need to be pushing them from the left. And we already know that we can have an impact because we have already had an impact. Biden has moved a lot since the primary, thanks in part to the joint committee formed with the Sanders campaign, thanks to the fact that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Varshini Prakash from Sunrise were on the climate committee. And the result is that Biden has what activists in the movement are calling the boldest climate plan of any presidential campaign in American history, and that is just true. He is pledging to get the U.S. to 100% clean energy by 2035, which is much faster than he was talking about at the beginning. So we're no longer talking about, targets that are so far in the distance, like 2050, that it basically means that the next administration won't really have to be the one to determine it. He's talking about 20% of the federal budget on climate investments, which is just exponentially larger than what the Obama administration did with the stimulus after the financial collapse of 2008. 40% of investments in frontline communities. So that's the racial justice element. That is the piece of it that accounts for the fact that frontline communities, overwhelmingly communities of color, have borne the brunt of the toxic brunt of fossil fuel extraction and combustion in their communities. So, I think it's exciting, and we're going to have to hold them to it. We're going to have to push them. But, I don't think people should feel like begrudging about casting a ballot. I think people should feel like there is still a case for climate optimism, as my friend Danielle Aldana Cohen recently wrote.
Exactly. Yeah. Climate optimism is so real. And I think, again, I love my thin silver linings, but I think with climate optimism, there is something to see with what it will look like to create a just recovery from COVID-19 that can be rated with this response. So thank you, Naomi. Last question, briefly, what is personally giving you hope and strength right now? And if you're struggling with that, which I think some of us are, how are you creating your own hope?
Oh my goodness. Last night was a full moon. It was really witchy. I got some hope from that. Full moon on Halloween. It was a blue moon. So I sort of tried to call in the ancestors and all the people who have worked so hard to have the kind of progressive movements that we have right now and the scale that we have right now, which is greater than at any point in my lifetime, right? I'm terrified like everyone else, but I have to remind myself that the size of the progressive movement is like nothing I've ever seen before. The strategy of it, the fact that we have people on the outside and the inside, I take so much hope from the fact that the squad is going back, emboldened, powerful. I could care less how much the clothes on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez cost on the cover of Vanity Fair. I care that she
does not own.
Exactly. She doesn't own them. But what matters is that was a power cover. That was a power cover. She looked so damn powerful because because the squad is going back to DC with this amazing mandate, having fought these deep-pocketed primary challenges. In the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they're going back with such a powerful mandate. And the squad has grown. Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush. I mean, I am excited about the prospect of a kind of an inside outside real strategy of social movements and people pushing the party from the inside. And so, yeah, I think it's a scary moment, but I don't feel hopeless. I don't feel hopeless at all. And I think it's really important to ground ourselves in what we're fighting for, the people we're fighting for, the places we're fighting for. And when we do that, then we realize that we can't, indulge our despair. We just can't.